Thanks, Bill, and good afternoon. So as Bill mentioned, we're going to give you folks a brief tutorial about our plan sponsor link, which is a website that we use to capture the year-end data necessary to complete the annual compliance testing. To access our plan sponsor link, you folks can go to tra401k.com, which will bring you to the site that you see here in front of you. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll be able to choose this blue login button, and you'll choose the second option, which is plan sponsor link. This is going to bring you to the login page for our plan sponsor link. For those of you going into this for the very first time, your username is traditionally an email address, and if you've already set this up, you would have a password. However, if you are going in as a first-time user, you can see underneath the sign-in button, there's two options. One is forgot password, the other one is first-time user. Feel free to go ahead and select that. It'll ask for your email address. Once you enter your email address, you will then receive an email with a temporary password to the system. You'll come back to this login page, put in your username, which again will be your email address, enter the temporary password, and then click sign in. Obviously, if you've forgotten your password, if you already have one, you can choose forgot password. A similar process would occur. You would receive an email with that temporary password. Go ahead and enter that, and then it'll allow you to change that when you access the system for the first time. So we'll go ahead and access the plan sponsor link. So from a housekeeping perspective, just kind of give you a layout of what it looks like. The default tab that when you log into the plan sponsor link will always be My Active Tasks. So there's times where we may be asking you folks to perform some sort of an action item. Traditionally, you'll find these listed under My Active Tasks. Everybody on the call and all of our clients are assigned a client relationship manager. If you have any questions, and we'll give the number at the end of the session here, you can feel free to contact your client relationship manager, and they can guide you through any of the process that we talk about today. And you'll see the multiple tabs across the top. There may be times where you'll come in here to look up active distributions, as you see. We're going to talk about data collection at the end. If you wanted to see your documents, you can see there's a tab that you'll be able to select, and it'll have a housing of all the different documents that are associated with your plan. We're not going to get into this today, but you do have an option to send any employee at the Retirement Advantage a secure file, which is kind of like a Dropbox, like a Google Dropbox. You don't have to do anything but choose who you're going to send it to, and you can feel confident that if you're sending census data and so on, that it will be sent secure. And then finally, there's an option for industry bulletins that we may post from time to time. But again, from a housekeeping perspective, that's how this site is laid out. For our conversation today, we're going to perform the year-end data collection task. If you were coming into this for the first time, you would only see one of these year-end data collection tasks. You would click on the one that's appropriate, and you would go all the way to the right, and the way that you start the task is to go ahead and choose the green button that says Begin Task. It just takes a moment for this to cycle. So as you can see across the top, there are multiple steps that need to take place to complete the data collection process. And what we're going to do is walk through each one of these steps just to ensure that you understand the process necessary to complete these steps. This is very similar to if any of you have had 401ks in the past. There's many times that organizations may have sent to you either paperwork that you needed to fill out, or also directed you to some form of an electronic way to capture this data. That's really what we're doing here. The first step is company contact information. A lot of this is defaulted based on the plan documents that we received. We capture that data and populate it into our system. If for some reason you see something that is not accurate, you can go ahead and edit it in a variety of different ways here. but you can also contact your client relationship manager because if we have something incorrect here, it might be incorrect elsewhere. So we do want to make sure that we are updating this information in a variety of different areas. So from a housekeeping perspective, if you look in the upper right-hand corner here, if you ever wanted to make some notes in regards to whatever that topic is, you can click this green notes button and you can choose add, and you can type in whatever note you want. At the end of the process, and I'll show you where this populates, you'll be able to read the notes, and those notes are going to be captured. So the folks here at TRA that are going to go through this information, they'll see those notes and hopefully understand the purpose of that note itself. To add data, you can go ahead and choose an add button, and you'd be able to add whatever information is being requested. And obviously, you can edit data here too. But again, in regards to any company information, this is feeding from other sources. So you do also want to reach out to your client relationship manager if you see something that's inaccurate, as I mentioned. So at the end of every step, you're going to have the option to choose save. And when you do choose save, if you look across the top here, you're going to get a green check mark. That confirms that that section has been saved and validated. So you do not have to go back. So as you progress through each one of these steps, if for some reason you make it halfway through this and you get busy and you start working on something else, when you come back into the system, anything that has a green check mark, you will not have to go back in and redo. So it'll be saved in perpetuity unless you go back in and make additional edits. So step 2 is employer company data. So this is very similar to the company contact information. This is information that we're pulling from outside sources, outside this site, but inside of the Retirement Advantage. You'll see that we have the EIN, the fiscal year end for your plan, what type of organization you are, the NAIC code. If you wanted to populate a payroll provider, you could do that, and what the frequency is here. Again, if something's different, you don't want to go in and make the changes yourself. Just reach out to your client relationship manager, and they'll be able to assist you. If you look across the top, you'll see the task, and you'll know that you are in the right task if you see the year-end data collection for the year that we're working on. And obviously, if you have multiple plans, you'll see the plan that you're doing it for. It's across the top here, if you can see what I'm highlighting. So in case you have any questions about which plan that you're doing it for or which compliance year-end you're doing it for, it's always across the top here. So again, to complete the step, we'll go ahead and choose save. And as you can see, we get the green check mark under company, so that's completed. This section here is principals. This is a list of any owners of the company and the percentage of ownership. And so what you want to do is make sure that we are aggregating to 100% ownership. So if you only have 2 owners and they only equate to 50%, we still would like to come up to 100%. If it's many different shareholders, let's say there's 100 different shareholders that made up the other 50%, we could probably categorize them as multiple shareholders, write in 100, not their names. We're not writing in 100, just in parentheses, we'd write 100 shareholders and make that the other 50%, if that makes sense. So you can come into any one of these and add additional owners, as I mentioned before, by choosing the add button. You can edit what's already in place, and obviously you can delete. So if we have something wrong, and it's possible, a lot of the data that we have, again, comes from certain records. The records could be a little bit older, or there may have been an ownership change throughout the year. So you can go ahead and add that in here. And as I mentioned before, in the upper right-hand corner, you can always choose notes, and you can make a note and say, hey, the ownership changed partway through the year. This is what the ownership is. If your organization is a non-for-profit organization, what we would like you to do here is just go ahead and enter your company name. You would not put a title, and you would just write 100% ownership. And again, you could make a note and say, hey, we are a nonprofit organization, and is noted as below. So once this is complete, you can go ahead and, again, choose save. We're going to get that green check mark across the top. And then the next step is family relationships. It is important for the Retirement Advantage to know if there are any family members within the company. Um, as you probably are aware, if you've sponsored a 401k, family members may be considered owners via a rule called family attribution. So what you can do here is you can add any family members. Again, there may be some populated here. There might not be. Really, the types of family members that we're looking for are parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren, and spouses. So when it comes to siblings, we're not looking for brothers and sisters or cousins or uncles or anything like that. Okay. So you can go ahead and enter the name. You would choose the relationship. I know there's a lot to choose from here, but as I mentioned, the ones that we're looking for are spouse, parents, grandparents, grandchildren, and children. So everything else you can, you don't really have to go ahead and enter. I think we keep this in here for people that want to go ahead and list all potential family members. But again, it would be unneeded. And if you have any questions in regards to who should be listed, who shouldn't be listed, you could contact the client relationship manager, and they're certainly happy to help explain what we're looking for. We're also going to want to know who they're related to. So if there is a child that's on payroll, obviously who are the parents. If there's a grandchild, who are the grandparents, etc. So once you have that complete, you would go ahead and save that, and you would have a populated record right here. And if at some point you need to make some additional changes to it, obviously you'll be able to go in and edit it if there were a record here. So to move forward, as always, we're going to go ahead and hit save. The next step is around other businesses owned. So this section pertains to the owners of the company who are also full or partial owners of any other business. So if there is one owner that happens to have some ownership in some other business, you may want to go ahead and enter that here. You could make a note, or you can contact your client relationship manager, and they can certainly answer what might be relevant in this category. There are some companies that have complex ownership structures. So if you do have a complex ownership structure, again, you might be able to bypass this for now and then reach out to your client relationship manager. And if you have a spreadsheet or a Word document that breaks it all down, you can go ahead and send that to the client relationship manager, and they can help you out with that. So, but again, if there's any information that we have on our records that may be populated here, if you want to go ahead and populate it here, that's fine. If you want to add notes, that'll work too. The next step is contact. So company contacts and the Retirement Advantage contacts and advisors, etc. Again, a lot of this is pre-populated based on information that we gathered prior to setting you folks up in the system. If there is anything that's out of the ordinary, let us know, and we can go ahead and revise this. You really don't have to go in here and make any changes. Just as you go through it, you can glance through it and say, hey, this is not right. If you could go ahead and change our advisor, they changed, or the contact here at the organization has changed a bit, you can go ahead and just either put a note in the system, as mentioned before, or again. And I'll say it a couple times because it's important to know that you folks do have access to a single point of contact here with the Retirement Advantage. And again, that is your client relationship manager. So I will say that probably a handful of times just to remind you that you can contact somebody here. The next step is the annual employer questionnaire. These are a lot of questions that you'll find that simply are just yes or no. This information is going to help TRA prepare the most accurate and complete annual compliance report as possible. And so there's a variety of questions that we do require answers to make sure that we can do a thorough annual compliance test. So what I'll do here is I'm going to go through just quickly each one of these questions and try to answer some questions that we do get from customers to make sure that you understand at least the nature of each one of these. So the first and foremost, you'll see, did the employer maintain any other retirement plans in addition to the plan here at TRA? And maybe TRA wasn't doing any administrative services for this. Years ago, this may or may not have made sense. Years ago, people used to have a 401k plan, something that employees could defer into, and then even a profit share type plan. So there was two plans. At some point, A company may have moved a 401k plan to one provider but kept the profit share plan somewhere else. And so if for some reason you do have a plan that's not being serviced by TRA, you do want to just let us know that one exists. And the reason for that is, as you can imagine, with a lot of the year-end tests that take place, there is some requirement to bring all these plans together and test them as if they're one. The idea is we want to make sure the employees are benefiting fairly. So you'll answer simply yes or no to that question. Was the business sold or merged with any other business during the year? There's a variety of reasons why we need that as well. So if you did go through some form of M&A throughout the year, you want to go ahead and hit yes. And by the way, the testing year that we would be looking at right now is 2019. So obviously we're asking questions in 2020, but the data and the responses to the questions should be relevant to, in the example of today, relevant to 2019. And hopefully that makes sense for you. The next question is for the planned TRA services or assets held at multiple investment providers. So this is a little bit different. So let's say hypothetically you had a 401k plan and you have a broker dealer that like American Funds is holding some of the assets, but then you also have some money at John Hancock for some reason. You have money at Fidelity for some reason, and so on. Not mutual funds, just actual accounts elsewhere. You would want to let us know that. Most 401k or profit share or cash balance plans are usually from one provider. So this is usually you're going to answer no to this, but if you know for a fact that you're using multiple providers, you want to go ahead and choose yes, and then just name the providers. We'll likely reach out to you and ask you some additional questions based on the way that you answered the question. The next question is, are your plan's assets currently invested in any non-traditional holdings? And so traditional 401ks and profit shares might be in potentially stock, but traditionally mutual funds. If you find that your 401k or your profit share cash balance is invested in something else, like life insurance, real estate, gold or silver, like gold bullion, artwork, and things like that, you're going to want to go ahead and let us know. And then again, you'll likely be contacted by the client relationship manager just to make sure we understand the nature of the assets or the investments, excuse me. The next question is, have all newly eligible employees been offered the opportunity to participate in the plan on their initial entry date based on the eligibility requirements? So this is just a general question. We're hoping that if you folks are doing it yourself, that you're making every employee that does become eligible aware to enter into the plan. If for some reason they're not, it is important that you let us know. There might be corrective actions that need to take place. The idea with any corrective actions is you want to get ahead of it early, so whether it be the IRS or DOL doesn't come knocking on your door, that you're basically saying, hey, we already caught this. We knew that we didn't tell this person that they were eligible, so we corrected that. So again, just a simple yes or no with that. There are times where you folks might rehire employees. A lot of seasonal type employees get rehired quite a bit. There are also circumstances when rehires should be eligible when they enter. So for example, if let's say you had 1 year eligibility and you had a new hire that worked for 6 months, then they separated from service, maybe came back 6 months later, they may actually be considered eligible to enter in the plan, even if you had 1 year eligibility, because that clock doesn't stop while they're separated from service. There's some rules out there that prevents that clock from stopping. There are some rules that would make the clock stop, but in most cases, when a rehire is rehired, assume that clock never stopped, so they may be eligible once they're rehired. If you have any questions on that, you can obviously contact your client relationship manager. The next question is, on the employee census section of this request, you'll be asked to provide employee information for this plan. The information requested must be provided for all employees receiving W-2 wages, not just those participating in the plan. So the question here is just to make sure that you are giving us census data on all employees, even if they're not participating in the plan. Anybody who's on payroll essentially should be provided to us, because when it comes to 401k testing, there's certain tests that need to measure the people that are participating and the ones that aren't, and so on. So you do need to make sure that you are providing all census information. The next question is around leased employees. There's some details around leased employees, and there may be some reasons why leased employees may need to participate in the plan and many where they may not. They could be excluded and so on. So again, it's just a general question. If you have any leased employees, you may know if you do. So you would check yes here, and then we would likely reach out to you and ask you some questions on that. The next question is around collectively bargained employees, so union employees. If you have any employees that need to be excluded because you have some folks that are union employees, et cetera, go ahead and check yes. And again, we'll ask you some questions in regards to that. The next question is, do you have any employees excluded due to being a non-resident alien? Again, you should know the answer to that, yes or no. Did you have any employees that terminated due to death or disability during this plan year? So you likely know that, so you just want to go ahead and check yes or no. It is asking for their name, so if you have someone that passed away or separated from service due to disability, you'd want to go ahead and make a note there. If you don't make a note there, we'll reach out to you and find out who those individuals may be. So in regards to contributions, everybody's plan's a little bit different. You may offer employer matching contributions. So, we have the ability to help calculate those for you, or if you're making those throughout the year, we kind of want to know that. So the question here is, have you made or do you plan on making a matching contribution? Depending on how you answer the question, you might be able to bypass some of the questions. If you are, we're going to want to know that formula. So if you're not a safe harbor plan, and for those of you that are safe harbor, understand what that means. If you're not safe harbor, you might not. But we don't always know the formula. So if you're doing dollar for dollar up to 4% of compensation, or if you're doing 25 cents in the dollar, you're going to want to go ahead and write that in there for us. And if for some reason we're not understanding what you're writing, again, we'll reach out to you, whether via email or phone call, just to find out. And then do you want us to calculate the match? A lot of what we'll do for you is, if you're making a match on a per pay period, and you're just continuously doing that, at the end of the year, if you're giving us the formula, what we'll do is we'll just make sure that it's calculated correctly throughout the year. So we'll kind of do a spot, well, it's not a spot check. We're going to look at all of them, but we'll kind of make sure that everybody's getting the right match. And if not, we'll let you know and say, hey, it looks like somebody got a little too much or a little too little. And that'll be part of the annual compliance testing. The last question in regards to matching contributions is, if you haven't made it per pay period, when do you plan on making that match? So some people make a year-end match, believe it or not. And so, if you're submitting this data to us, let's say February 15th, we would prefer that you don't suggest that you want the calculation by February 17th. So it takes a little bit of time to make sure that we're calculating it correctly, and we got everybody's compensation and so on. So we're asking for about 15 business days for a calculation. But if you need it sooner, just let us know, and let our client relationship manager know, and we'll work with you to go ahead and get that calculation sooner. So the next section is employer discretionary contributions, i.e. or AKA profit share. Just means that an employee does not have to take action to receive this. They just need to meet certain service requirements, age 21, 1 year, 6 months, whatever, 1,000 hours, those types of things. The question is, are you folks looking to make any of those? And if so, kind of move to the next question. How do you want to make it? Are you giving everybody 3%? Are you giving everybody $10 or $100? Or is there a cross-tested type setup with your program? If so, we'll just kind of make a note there. And then, do you need us to calculate that for you? So similar questions to the matching contributions. And if you are planning on doing it, by when? So a lot of folks will try to make contributions prior to an extended tax filing. So if you're looking to make contributions all the way out to September, please let us know in advance that you want to go ahead and do that. So, July, maybe even August, early August, letting us know that you want to make a contribution prior to extended tax filing. And then new plans only. And again, this only applies to, not new to TRA, just new plans. So if you're sponsoring a 401k for the very first time this year, or for the year that we're referencing here, 2019, then this question would apply. So basically it's saying, please enter the date you initially began withholding deferrals from eligible employee compensation. Okay. So there are times where the compensation, so if somebody makes $100,000, but they started the plan halfway through the year, let's say that meant they only made $50,000 for the year, we might only be looking at compensation of $50,000, not the full $100,000 based on when the plan started. So that's one of the reasons why we're asking that. And then lastly, again, new plans only, not new to TRA, just new 401ks, period. We need to identify anybody that earns over $120,000 in the prior year. And for those of you that have a 401k, it's because we measure certain populations, what we call highly compensated employees versus non, and this helps identify those individuals. Okay. So when you complete this, you would go ahead and hit save. I'm not going to because I didn't complete anything, so it won't let me save it. But I'm going to go ahead and move to the next step, and this is the 5500 step. So you folks may be aware, especially if you offer a 401k plan, there is an annual reporting requirement that needs to be filed with the Department of Labor every year. And on that, there are certain key points of information that need to be added to that 5500 so the Department of Labor can review and make sure that the 401k has been administrated correctly. Again, I'll go through these questions. There's not as many of these, but the first question is, have you remitted any late deferral deposits? So in other words, if normally you're submitting payroll on a weekly basis and for some reason there was one payroll that went months later and you finally caught it and said, oh my gosh, I forgot that, we didn't do the January 15th payroll and it's now March 1st, and then you apply that payroll, that's okay that you do that, but it is considered late. And so when we're asking questions about that, you would say, yes, I did go ahead and submit that late. There is a lot of guidelines out there and ways that we can correct that. And so you definitely want to make us aware of that, and we can help you through that correction process. So that's what this question is here. And again, you have the option to have TRA calculate lost earnings. And so, for example, if for some reason the monies would have been deferred on January 15th, but they didn't get deferred until March 1st, the idea is that those monies were not in the market, i.e. the stock market, and so they missed out on potential returns. And so the earnings are the potential missed out return from the point when it should have been deposited to when it was actually deposited. So technically, I guess you could calculate that. It may not be advisable, but TRA can assist with that process. So again, if you have late deferrals, probably contact your client relationship manager and we can help you through that process. The next question is, fiduciaries are required to be bonded for at least 10% of the trust assets as of the value of assets as of the beginning of the year. And we want to know if you actually had a fidelity bond for that year. So this is something you traditionally get through an insurance agent. So it's not something that the Retirement Advantage offers. But if you do have an insurance agent, a lot of times they can offer this to you. And again, it's 10% of your assets. So for example, if you had $1 million in 401k assets, it would be $100,000 in fidelity bond coverage. However, they don't require you to have more than $500,000. So if for some reason you had a $10 million plan, you wouldn't need to have $1 million in coverage. The max is $500,000. And again, a fidelity bond is just designed to protect the employees from potential employer or service provider mishandling of the 401k assets. Okay, so i.e. embezzlement and things like that. The idea is it kind of covers it up to a certain amount in the event that somebody, in the event there's some bad actors that are touching the money. We do need for you to enter the actual dollar amount. So again, if you have a $5,000 fidelity bond, you want to go ahead and note that in here. This is a required line item on the 5500, so it is important that you put a number in there. If you don't have one, again, reach out to your client relationship manager, and we can refer you to some groups, but again, we don't offer the product, and you can speak to just about any insurance agent. Next question is, has a resolution to terminate the plan been adopted during the plan year or any other? So if you would know if you're planning on terminating the plan or did choose to terminate the plan, meaning you no longer wish to offer it anymore, you can go ahead and answer yes or no to that. The next question, I won't read it in all detail, but what it's asking is, has any money transferred into this plan or to another plan? So did you acquire a company and there was some money that transferred into this? Did a company acquire you or only a certain number of your employees for some reason and those monies transferred out? We are not talking about withdrawals or distributions, so not individual withdrawals or distributions, something that happened in a group format. So either a bunch of employees moved in all at once, not as a whole, not as individuals, or it all moved out as a whole and not as individuals. That's what we're asking here. So if you did have that occur, there is some questions that need answered. So where did it go, which is the plan name? Is there an EIN associated with that? The amount that transferred, when it transferred, and there's a code on the 5500, which is an IRS plan number. So you go ahead and identify that too. The second to last question is, again, only in regards to new plans. And so you, as I mentioned, you are required to file a 5500 once a year, and the Department of Labor requires that it's filed electronically. And so you can work with your client relationship manager. However, there's a system that they call, I'll use the acronym EFAST, so right here highlighted. You would need to just create an account. There's no cost or anything associated. It's a one-time setup. You're going to get a username, password, and I think a PIN. With all that information, you'll use that in perpetuity to continue to file your 5500s for years to come. So you can always get into like a forgot password and things like that scenario with them. But again, it's a site that we're going to, when we get to the 5500 stage of your 401k and you need to file it, we're going to push you to a site that'll help with that process, and it'll help kind of navigate it. So you won't have to know what links to go to once you need to file your 5500. It's just that you have to go outside our system at some point and get your own credentials. And then once you have your credentials, we're going to push you through our system to use those credentials to file your 5500. And again, we do a lot of communication here at the Retirement Advantage. So if you get emails and you don't understand them, feel free to reach out to your client relationship manager. And then finally, every year, we feel as though we do an excellent job. And if for some reason, or at the end of every data collection, we always ask if our clients feel the same way. So if you're willing to be a reference for future clients of the Retirement Advantage, you can go ahead and check yes or no here. There's no penalty for choosing no. So it's entirely up to you how you want to go ahead and choose that. It's just if we have new clients, sometimes they want to hear references. So if you're willing to do that, you can go ahead and check yes there. You can also add a note and say, I chose that I'd be willing to be a reference, but I want to be notified first, and so on. So whatever you feel comfortable doing. So again, I'm not going to save this because I didn't answer any questions, but if I did, I would have 2 additional green check marks across the top here. The last component of the data collection is the employee census. So this may be something that you're sort of familiar with. It's usually some sort of a payroll export, so something that extracts something that comes out of your payroll system. We need relatively what I'd call basic information in regards to an employee, but specific to 401k. Won't go through each individual line item here, but you can see obviously we need their name, their social, usually dates of birth. We need to know when they're hired, when they left, were they rehired, as I talked about, gross compensation. There may be reasons to list their commissions and other types of benefits, and it depends on your plan design. Again, if you're unsure, we can obviously answer those questions for you. We need to know how much they deferred in that plan year for pre-tax, if they did any Roth. Did you folks make any contributions, whether it be a match or an employer contribution? But we need to know how many hours they worked. So a lot of times somebody's working full-time. If you're not tracking hours, it would be 2080, 2,080 hours for a full-time person. if they're a union employee. So for smaller organizations, you have the option to go ahead and add, as you can see here to the right, a new employee, and you can fill in each individual field. The information here will be traditionally pre-populated from the prior year. So if, let's say, you folks were with us in 2018, a lot of the data you would see here is from 2018. So you might, and what you'd be populating is updating from 18. So, oh, this Jim Jones, he's terminated. He terminated February 2019. You would write February 2019 as reason for separation, or obviously if the compensation changed and so on. So you can edit and delete here. However, many of you may have a large population, and the last thing you want to do is go into each one of these individually. If you look here to the left, you'll see an import-export option. An export option will export what we already have in the system. I would recommend doing this because, again, this is traditionally prior year data. If you don't have anything here, that's okay. You can still go ahead and choose export, and you can choose a file. Both are Excel. So there's two different versions of Excel. When you do that, I already pulled mine out here. This is what you'll get. So just a real basic rudimentary Excel file. And you could probably program your payroll software or ask the payroll company to provide a file with all these columns. So they're the same columns that we just went through. And you can see how it's broken down. If you are making any changes to this, what you cannot do is you cannot move columns around. You cannot retitle the columns. You want to keep them exactly how they are. I wouldn't suggest you get into changing any real formatting in any one of the cells. Just type in whatever you're looking to type in and move to the next cell. Or again, you can upload a file or upload data, just make sure it fills within the applicable columns here. There is an instructions page on the bottom. You'll see the separate worksheet. This explains every one of the every one of the columns. And one of the things that I like to point out is if you look here where it says reason for separation. Now, I know there's many different reasons why employees leave organizations, but from a 401k perspective, we only really have three categorizations of why somebody left. One is death, as you can see here. One is disability or termination. So the system can be a tad sensitive. So where it says termination, if you wrote terminated, you wouldn't be able to import, and I'll show you how to do this, but you wouldn't be able to import it back into the system because it's not going to recognize the term. So it is important that when it comes to reason for separation, it's death, disability, or termination. So just please keep that in your mind. And then in regards to the order of these worksheets, just keep them there. So when you upload, keep the instructions attached to it. So try not to change it and try not to change the order of the worksheets. So if the instructions are showing as the second worksheet, make sure you keep it as the second worksheet. And if employees is the first, keep it as the first. So once you make your changes for the applicable year, you'll come back to Plan Sponsor Link and you're at the Employee Census Upload. And what you can do is go ahead and choose Import. So you saved it in some folder somewhere on your computer. So we'll go ahead and choose Import. We'll get the option to choose the file. We'll be able to select the file. You're going to add it here and then go ahead and hit Import. And it'll give you the results. It'll let you know that it was successful. So it was imported successfully, and it's telling you how many records were added. A record is how many employees. So if you have 50 employees and you only see 25, something's not right. Okay? As you can see in this yellow bar, it says issues have been detected in the employee census record. Click here to view the issues. So when I click here to view the issues, you're going to get two types of issues. Well, you'll get general issues and employee specific. But the types that you get is either a warning or an error. A warning is something that you can ignore if you want to. So you can see here, it's just a note. It says in most cases, at least one employee will have deferrals. You could have a 401k and nobody deferred in the plan. So you could still submit your census. It's just that nobody deferred in the plan. So that's not a problem. That's why it's a warning. It's just letting you know maybe you forgot something or maybe you didn't. However, an error will not let you continue until it's corrected because it is necessary information. So for example, you'll see the message. It says hours is required. And who's it for? Jim Jones. So it looks like Jim Jones, we forgot to put the hours in there. Maybe he's salary and you didn't initially pull down hours. Well, like I said, a full-time employee would be 2040 for the year. So a full-time employee would be, 2080 for the year. So you could just go ahead and write in 2080. Obviously the gross compensation and so on. So again, this information is something that's required for you to progress through the employee census upload. However, once you complete this and you hit save, you would then go to the approval step. And I know we went through a lot of information here. Again, a lot of those questions were yes or no. You should be able to kind of get through them relatively quickly. 5,500, hopefully relatively quickly. This here, if you're using it as an upload and you're working on it as a spreadsheet, most of our clients find that a little bit easier instead of going in here and changing these one-off. But again, if you only have 5 employees and you want to do it this way, whatever is more useful for you, you want to go ahead and do that. And then the last step is approval. So we went through all of these steps. We answered all the questions. We should have all green check marks to the left here. And assuming that we do, you'll see if you, for some reason, wanted to provide any documents to us, you could add these here. Any notes, so those notes that we talked about, they would be populated here, or you can add a final note, whatever you want to do. And then you would go ahead and hit sign and submit. Now, I can't do that for the demonstration purposes because these all need to be check marked. But if I choose sign and submit, you'll need to enter your name. It's going to ask for your email and email address, and then you'll click submit. You're only validating that you answered the question to the best of your ability. So you're not going to be held 1,000% accountable for all the data that's in there. It's just suggesting that you entered it to the best of your ability. And if we have additional questions for you, we'll go ahead and reach out. Okay. So I know that's a lot of information, and you may say to yourself, well, there's times where I'm just answering the same questions over and over again from prior years. And so if we look to the top and you see these tabs across the top, if you choose this data collection tab, you can run a report. And let's say we'll see this last report here. It says year-end data collection, and it says the period of 1/1 to 12/31/2017. This is a report from 2017. Well, I want to see how I answered the questions. If I choose report, we'll get a download. And again, everything comes out as an Excel spreadsheet. And this is just showing the census that I showed. This is not related to that. And this here will show all the ways that you answered the questions from prior years. So you'll see this would show the ownership from 2017. Oh, yep, it's still the same. I don't need to try to figure that out. If there are any family members, I don't need to figure that out. All those questions, it'll show how you answered those questions. Same with the 5,500. It'll also show the census from the prior year and any notes that you put in there, etc. Okay. So if you ever get to a point where you're unsure how to answer a question, but it really hasn't changed, you will have the option to go ahead and do that. Okay. So what we'll do now is this is actually I've completed the demonstration in regards to the year-end data collection. As I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions that you want to speak to your single point of contact here at the Retirement Advantage, it would be your client relationship manager. I'm going to give you a phone number, and the number that you can always contact is 1-888-872-2364. And again, it's 1-888-872-2364. That would be the way that you could contact your client relationship manager.